and then you tell everyone around you this was a suicide and we're going to prove it's a suicide, that's not law enforcement. That's by definition a cover-up. I think it would have been very easy for the administration to be transparent about Epstein. I think it would have helped the country. I think it would have helped the administration a lot.
Absolutely.
Which was very clearly a murder. He was murdered.
Tucker Carlson just exposed the sad and ugly truth about the Epstein cover-up. And in this clip, he gets into whether he thinks the Trump administration has responsibility here or Trump himself, why he's trying to say that this is a Democratic hoax, and that's the line they've gone with, and the lingering questions about Epstein's suicide that still remain. So let's get right into it. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Why is it that Epstein files, somehow both parties come together when it gets to why should it not be public, right? They don't even give you real reasons, though. That's the crazy part. Like, Democrats don't fight over, we should push this because there must be something about Trump or some. And you have Republicans who are like, you know what? It's fine. Are we still talking about this guy, Tucker? Like, what is up with that?
I mean, I think the obvious answer is probably the right answer. I've talked to the president about it a lot, and his view is that this is all a trap. He said this many times in public.
Wait, all a trap? What do you mean by that? It's all a trap.
He believes, or he says,
right.
And he said to me, and I think he said in public, that this reminds him of Russiagate. This is an attempt by Democrats to ensnare him in a fake scandal. He had nothing to do with Epstein. He's not, never did anything creepy. Which, by the way, I just want to say, I believe that completely. I think I know him pretty well, and quite well, and I just don't imagine that at all. That's whatever the president sins.
Then why not? Why not? But
I don't know the answer. Right. I think it's incredibly counterproductive. I think it would have been very easy for the administration to be transparent about Epstein. I think it would have helped the country. I think it would have helped the administration a lot.
Absolutely.
Well, it doesn't seem like it would have helped it given their willingness to cover it up, and I can't agree with Tucker on this. This wasn't a Democratic hoax or a trap like Russiagate, to the extent that the Democrats, while in power under Biden, used Russiagate as the weapon against Trump. They wouldn't touch the Epstein files, and that would be explainable, pertaining to how the Republicans in power have handled this, to explain that they're all implicated in some regard. That is the answer to people that say, well, if Trump was involved, why didn't the Democrats just unleash this upon all of us when they were in power? Well, they wouldn't do that if they too were associated in the same crimes. Now, that's not to say I have any proof that Trump was in the middle of this scandal, of the heinous and violative crimes that Epstein and his coadjutors participated in. Not at all. But at the same time, I think that's letting him off the hook a little bit and not, telling the truth about what this was. This isn't a Democratic hoax. This is something that Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and Dan Bongino talked about relentlessly, to bringing transparency into this case. And all the inconsistencies can't just be ignored. So this is one area where I don't agree with Tucker's perception of it. And I know he's close with Trump, doesn't always side with Trump over everything, especially on Israel. But in this, I think he's giving him way too much credence.
Giving it credibility.
Listen, I know you know him well, so I want to theorize here real quick, because no one, people do interviews and they don't really go into this stuff. Like, I don't know why are they so scared? So obviously, I'm not honestly even interested who was in the Epstein list, because I'm going to see all the good names there, because
right.
if I'm a vicious spy that wants some kind of, dirty stuff on a guy that's doing good, that's pretty much how I would do it. Like, I would target good people that are in powerful positions, making
right.
decisions. So could it be that, human emotion, if we're talking about the most damaging human emotion, it's mostly shame. Like, people do stuff because they are ashamed, and they will trample over love. Love is most powerful, but they will trample over love. But when it gets to shame, and the CIA learned this long time ago, people typically will do whatever it takes so that their dirty laundry is not out there. Could it be that Trump was there and he just doesn't want to jeopardize his presidency even putting it out there?
Well, I mean, that's a matter of documentary proof. that Trump knew Epstein. Trump's talked about this a lot.
Right.
Yeah, I knew Epstein. He did creepy stuff at my club. I kicked him out. It's absolutely true. I can verify this firsthand that Epstein was like always around, and like everyone you know knows Epstein, and having dinner at his house. And I don't think having dinner at his house or even necessarily going to his island is proof of a crime. I know a million people who had dinner with him, mostly liberal. He was liberal, but I don't, he had this kind of salon going on in his house right off Fifth Avenue in the 70s, biggest house in New York. And he was just inviting everyone to dinner. And Ehud Barak is living there. And he's got Stephen Hawking, and he's got members of the British royal family. And like, so on that level, knowing Epstein is not a crime.
Exactly, it's not a crime.
Much less something to be ashamed of. He was at the center of New York society and Palm Beach society for decades.
Yeah, he was at the nexus between this powerful network of rich politicians, rich businessmen, etc. But that doesn't answer still for the fact that the Trump administration is covering this up. They're saying we're not allowing you to get the Epstein files, raising all sorts of, red herrings, like let's try to get testimony from the grand jury, which seemed to very much be a red herring where there was nothing there. And even if they would have gotten that, it would have been heavily redacted. We know that evidence exists from Ghislaine Maxwell's trial that was withheld from the public. We know information pertaining to Epstein's role as a federal informant is being withheld, not only due to his, deal in 2007, I believe it was, in Palm Beach, but also as a result of the end of the Towers financial scandal in which Epstein participated as a federal informant to take down his business partner, Stephen Hoffenberg, in what was one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in U.S. history. So all this to say, yeah, it's well documented that Trump was friends with Epstein. Looks like their relationship broke off in about 2004. There's conflicting reasons as to why that happened, whether it was Epstein plucking up employees from him or disputes over, a real estate, a home that they got in a bidding war against. But at the same time, that doesn't answer why this is a cover-up. You can say, he's not implicated in crimes. That's true, but he has to receive blame from that.
So if you want, it's on the internet. You want a list of people who hung out with Epstein? It's like half the people on television hung out with Epstein.
But here's the problem, though. Here's where like things don't line up for me. So if this guy is a Mossad operative and conducting an operation actively in the United States, trying to target people, trying to get something on them, why are our agencies okay with that? Like, that's what I just don't get.
Well, you know perfectly well. Look.
Yeah, no, I know. But like, I
so there are a lot of
right?
Look, I'm speculating at this point. He clearly had contact with Israeli intelligence. He clearly had contact with U.S. intelligence, and maybe most critically British intelligence, which never gets the credit it deserves for being probably a little scarier than Mossad and CIA, and ruthless and just involved in everything bad. There's nothing bad that happens that doesn't have British intelligence involved in it, I have noticed a lot. So there's that. Then there's also the question of was his sex life, like a hobby, or was it a job, or was it both? Was this a honey trap?
I think it was both, yeah.
Probably both.
Right.
Yeah, no doubt, but I think the answer to Elizabeth Lane's question, why do our intelligence agencies have no problem with this, is because they're in cahoots with the Mossad. They're in cahoots with MI6. The Five Eyes operate as sort of the same globalist entity when it comes to intelligence. And what do I mean by intelligence? I mean psychological operations against the public in those respective countries. CIA regime change propaganda, Israel first Zionist propaganda, anything to spur on wars, to take money from the U.S. middle class and send it right into the pockets of rich weapon makers like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon. And by the way, giving a lot of it to AIPAC too. They act as if they're indistinguishable in some regards. Trump was pulling in Mossad agents into discussions about his Iran policy during that 12-day war. So that's the reason. They are in cahoots. They have the same objectives, and that's not the same objectives as regular day Americans that don't want to prioritize those things, that view them rightly as disastrous, or at least are ignorant to these things happening, despite, the propaganda that government's just a reflection of what the people want. Yeah, right.
There's no Epstein list. There are no Epstein files. I know this. all of the real story begins in 2006-07 when he's arrested in Palm Beach. And I think this is public and it's worth looking at, is the search warrant. Jeffrey Epstein's house in Palm Beach basically was written to help Jeffrey Epstein. So this came to the attention of the authorities because a girl complained about him. They had to investigate it. They did. There was a lot there. And then the search warrant basically protected him, and it prevented the authorities from collecting meaningful information. It was like, you're allowed to look in drawer 3, but not drawer 4. How did that happen? Like, that's the center of the story. So the truth is the U.S. government doesn't have that much. What they do have is the ability to talk to people who are involved, like Les Wexner, which they've never done.
Okay, so a few things here. First of all, he's absolutely right about the search warrant was kind of tipping Epstein off to being able to hide or obfuscate or destroy a lot of the evidence. So a lot of it wasn't gathered. And yeah, the U.S. government hasn't even talked to Les Wexner, it seems. You know, the guy that Epstein essentially inherited the business empire of L Brands, of Abercrombie and Fitch, and Victoria's Secret, and other businesses under that umbrella, making decisions for this guy when Wexner's executives were coming up to him and saying, you know, boss, who is this guy? What is going on here? You know, I don't think Wexner's ever been open about what that relationship was, and some people think it was, you know, some kind of sexual relationship. Epstein himself was asked about that by federal prosecutors and pleaded the fifth. But at the same time, there are Epstein files, all right? That is what the DOJ memo points to that they're not revealing. That's why hell and high water has been brought against people like Ro Khanna, Thomas Massie, and Marjorie Taylor Greene for trying to force a vote via a discharge petition that Massie got, I think, 218 signatures to have a vote on. I think that was a vote on September 10th, the same day that Charlie Kirk was killed. It was either that day or around that. So the Republican establishment has done everything they can to stop those files from being released, up to and including opposing an effort by Epstein's victims that stood side by side with Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene, saying, we support this plan to get the truth and transparency. It won't victimize us anymore as victims. We want justice. We want the answers. And the Republicans and Trump and Mike Johnson have worked to stop this. So I don't agree with Tucker on this whatsoever.
Who is the longtime owner of The Limited, Victoria's Secret, lots of other companies, who was a very close friend of Jeffrey Epstein's, had some kind of clearly unusual relationship with him and wound up buying his property at Fifth Avenue, for example. I think also his house and his ranch in New Mexico, and a lot of things. Massive transfer of money from this guy, Les Wexner, in Ohio to Jeffrey Epstein. Why? Leon Black, same thing. He says for accounting services. That's clearly not true. Those are people who could be brought in to explain what they know, and they haven't been. So to me, I think the Epstein list, the client list, I have been reliably told that there is no such thing, really. But we know who the big players are because it's already been public, and they're not being questioned.
Yeah, I think that's actually generally true, that, you know, this Epstein client list, this hypothetical, you know, single Excel spreadsheet that has all of the operatives in this sex trafficking ring, all of the clients written down in nice, neat form. I don't think that exists. But I do think that evidence exists in various places that the feds do have access to based on the accusations of the victims, information and objects that have been collected from Epstein, including a lot of tapes out of a safe that was found in his Florida property, which had labels on them with famous people's names on them, binders and things taken from his house. You can find pictures of this that do exist, but I don't know that it's in the form of a singular Excel sheet. That's kind of been like this Rosetta Stone, like mythical object that somehow exists but's behind a veil. I do think the information exists. I don't think it's on a singular list. So I do buy that. But yeah, a lot of the major players are involved. They haven't been questioned. You know, none have been charged outside of Epstein and Jean-Luc Brunel, you know, who also committed suicide. Guess how? By hanging in a French prison, right? Jean-Luc Brunel did not kill himself either. It doesn't seem to me, but who knows? And other people connected to this too, like Mark Middleton, the Clinton undersecretary in the White House that facilitated many of Clinton's visits with Epstein, which happened 17 times during his administration, I believe. He was found dead with both a noose around his neck and a shotgun blast to the chest, and they said he committed suicide. Both a hanging and a shot to the chest. Yeah, make sense of that if you can.
And what is that?
Exactly.
What you tell me what that is. I don't know. And I think it's really distressing. So that's not about Mossad or MI6 or CIA.
Right.
That's about stuff that was in Vanity Fair magazine and no one's followed up on it. So I think, as usual, the crime is right in front of our faces. And I can't answer that question. I find it enormously frustrating. And I'll just say once again that the Trump administration, I think, would help itself quite a bit. I don't think they have anything to fear. If what people are saying they're afraid of is that Trump did something gross with women,
I really don't.
I just want to be clear. I do not believe that.
Yeah,
and I'm not covering
you.
for Trump. I just don't think that's true.
I mean, I don't have a position on that. Without more, I don't know. I can say he paid off a prostitute. You know, they called her a porn actress, but Stormy Daniels, he paid her off. But, you know, there's no evidence that he's engaged in, you know, underage sexual contact, illicit and illegal and, you know, just disgusting contact. But at the same time, I don't think you can be sure he didn't do that. So, you know, people are going to say, oh, that's way too pro-Trump, or no, you're way too anti-Trump with that sentiment. That's just how I feel. Without something in front of me, I can't latch onto it, but it's speculative in either direction of, you know, what you think is the truth regarding that. I haven't seen any documented evidence of it.
I've never seen any indication of it, and I've talked to people, to be totally honest with you, close to Epstein, very close to Epstein, who've told me off camera, in private, no, it's not, Trump never did that shit. So I don't think it's about that. But why is no one talking to Les Wexner? And most critical from my perspective is Epstein's death, which was very clearly a murder. He was murdered. I'd bet my house on it. And there's a lot of evidence that he was murdered, and the Justice Department under Bill Barr lied about it. And what is that? Again, that's not even, it's almost like the Bibi thing.
Yeah.
It's not really about Bibi. It's, you know, I don't like Bibi. I think he's deranged.
It's not about Bibi. It's about us.
It's about us. It's about us. It's not about Epstein. It's not about Mossad.
Right.
I just want to say again that I understand like some of the stories that the anti-Semites tell, okay? But I think ultimately the anti-Semites are really bad because they, on many levels, morally they're bad, of course, but they also, as a practical matter, the anti-Semites are bad because they draw you away from the actual truth, which is there's like serious corruption right next to us, nothing to do with Jews.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and they say, a lot of them that are adjacent to that movement say, well, it's just a limited hangout if you just put this on Israel and not Judaism itself. But in my mind, that's the limited hangout, where you take culpability away from the criminals in our own government, including many Christians or Zionist Christians and neocons that have plunged this country into debt, gotten involved in so many heinous military operations around the seas and around the world and around the Middle East because of our relationship with Israel and outside, you know, quests for hegemony and control, like in Afghanistan. That, you know, is something deserving of blame too. It goes far beyond Judaism. So that, in my mind, is the limited hangout, where you're not putting the culpability on individuals for their heinous acts. Like, it's all this, you know, ethnic group or, you know, a religion or creed, you know, and they're not the only ones. You know, there's people that say it's all the Islamists that do that. All that's wrong. Individuals are culpable for right or wrong, and many of them do include Jews, and many of them do include atheists, and many of them do include Christians, many of them do include Buddhists, etc. And placing blame where it squarely lies is the quest and, you know, the right path, I think, of every dissident. We can't shift into this collectivist narrative that just pits everything on an abstract concept or dividing lines on the basis of race or ethnicity.
And I mean it too. I'm not just saying that. So he was murdered in the most secure part of the federal detention facility in Manhattan, our biggest city. And Bill Barr, the then Attorney General under Donald Trump, covered it up. What? And it just so happens that Bill Barr's father, Donald Barr, is the one who hired Jeffrey Epstein without a college degree to teach at one of the most prestigious private schools in Manhattan. Maybe there's no connection there. I don't know, but it's an amazing coincidence. And then I just learned, and I believe it's true, I learned from a very well-informed person, that it was Donald Barr who got Epstein his job at Bear Stearns. Yes, at Bear Stearns. And by the way, that's not proof of anything, but it's
I call that circumstantial case, Tucker. It's not a proof. It is a circumstance.
Okay, well, other accounts have Alan Greenberg, who was the head of Bear Stearns, as the one that hired Epstein at Bear Stearns because he had some connection to someone who Epstein was tutoring in math after he left the Dalton school. That contradicts this. Who knows for sure? But it is true that Donald Barr got him the job at the Dalton school. That is the case. The father of William Barr, the guy whose custody Epstein eventually died under, and basically covered up any chance of investigating this as an actual homicide, saying, no, nothing to see here. This is a suicide, case closed. No questions should be asked. So just something to think about.
Potential case.
So I'm totally convinced, I've said this in public many times, he's threatened to sue me, and I would welcome that, that I think that Attorney General Barr covered up his death. I mean, I know that he did. He announced that it was a suicide before they'd done an investigation. So you're the chief law enforcement officer. Here are the rules. We don't say we know something until we know it. And you had no way to know that. So you announce it anyway, and then you tell everyone around you this was a suicide and we're going to prove it's a suicide. That's not law enforcement. That's by definition a cover-up. And that happened, and he admitted he did that. So he covered up Epstein's murder, and for whatever reason, and his dad got Epstein started in life. I just don't even know what to make of those. Those are facts, and I don't know what to make of them.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think Tucker's actually playing this very savvy by inviting the potential lawsuit from William Barr. Because what does that mean? Well, William Barr would be saying like, hey, Tucker's slandering me by saying I covered up this murder that was a homicide and I did everything to stop any kind of real investigation into it. Well, if that's the claim, this would go through the legal process, and as part of that, Barr would have to be questioned and probably reveal more information pertaining to his decision-making in that regard. And the ultimate defense against slander or libel charges is telling the truth. That's the ultimate defense to those things. So if Tucker's telling the truth, and to get to that point, you'd have to reveal all sorts of evidence that doesn't shine a light in that direction, but instead corroborates what Tucker is saying. That would be disastrous for William Barr. So I can see why, if you're very, sure of that, and I agree with Tucker on that, for sure, you would invite the lawsuit of a guy like William Barr. So let's hope that happens. I want to see that discovery. That's for sure. But yeah, I generally agree with Tucker on some of the things here, especially regarding the suicide. I think that he's covering too much for Trump and his behavior regarding this. There is files we know about. There's things from Epstein's acts as a federal informant, things from the search warrant we haven't gotten to the bottom of, things that haven't been unsealed regarding Ghislaine Maxwell's trial that have been withheld from the public. There are a lot of things, and all the evidence you need to just dispose of the idea that there's nothing there. It's such a stupid idea, is how hard the Uniparty, especially the Republican administration, and Mike Johnson have been working to thwart the release of those files like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie are working on. No more proof is needed than that. Because the Republicans could just laugh in their face, say, nothing's there. We'll just let them pass this legislation to do that and put egg on their faces. They won't do that. They're hell-bent on stopping it, and the legacy media won't cover it. Only dissident media covered that story. But I do want to hear from you. Is Tucker Carlson right? Do you think he's being too easy on Trump regarding the cover-up, too easy on this administration? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to Elizabeth Lane TV. Great interview from her. I hadn't heard much from her before this, but I think she did a good job. And if you like this video and my commentary, please consider becoming a member. You can do that by clicking the join button below to help support the channel, and I'm going to give you the gift of all of my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube if you do support me that way. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.